Welcome to Screw the Commute, the entrepreneurial podcast dedicated to getting you out of the car and into the money, with your host, lifelong entrepreneur and multimillionaire, Tom Antion.
Hey everybody, it's Tom here with episode 139 of Screw the Commute podcast. Today we're doing podcasting behind the scenes with the guy that handles all the stuff for Screw the Commute. His name is Larry Guerrera, and I might add, he's also a graduate of my school, and he's making money from what he learned. All right, so I got a big freebie here for you. Thank you for listening to the podcast. It's my $27 ebook, How to Automate Your Business. And just one of the tips in this book has saved me over 7 million keystrokes. It's probably 7.5 million by now. So check that out at screwthecommute.com/automate free, screwthecommute.com/automate free. And you should also get the special extra bonus I have there on podcasting, because this week and next week, we're going to go this week behind the scenes, and next week we're going to go in front of the scenes, and that will be a good document to have. So screwthecommute.com/automate free. Now, our podcast app's in the iTunes store, and you can check that out at screwthecommute.com/app, where Larry has made tremendous and complete instructions to show you how to use all the fancy features. So you can take us with you on the road and do all the fun stuff that it'll do. And let's see. Please tell somebody about the podcast. The more successful it is, the more freebies I'll be able to give out to you. So there we go. All right, our sponsor is the Internet Marketing Training Center of Virginia. It's a distance learning school which teaches legitimate techniques to make a great living, either working for someone else or starting your own online business, or both. So you can check that out at imtcva.org. And again, that's the school that Larry graduated from. Now, I also don't want you to get robbed in your or your family's higher education endeavors. So be sure to watch the higher education webinar we have at screwthecommute.com, and you can click on webinars. And keep in mind, just because it's in Virginia, it's distance learning, so you can be anywhere in the world and take classes. All right, let's get to the main event. Quality podcasting behind the scenes. Now, Larry Guerrera is here, and he's the guy behind now about 140 episodes of Screw the Commute. And in the beginning, it was kind of a learning process of how this all worked to get our show notes to show up properly and make connections with all the major podcast directories. And I also want to mention again, he's a graduate of IMTC, my school. And I kept getting word from the school that there was this old decrepit guy that was really sharp. He's on listen to me. He'll probably edit this out. And, we're used to hearing about younger tech-savvy kids, but an old guy from Long Island? Hardly ever hear that. But anyway, he does a wonderful job, and I'm thrilled he's on here today to fill you in on what goes on behind the scenes on a quality podcast. And also next week on episode 142, I'll be doing the companion episode on what goes on in front of the scenes before I ever turn over the final MP3 file to Larry. So let's get going on the behind the scenes stuff. Larry, how you doing, man?
After that intro, I just barely stopped laughing.
Wow, you're old and decrepit, aren't you?
I absolutely am, and you're right in front of me.
Yeah, I'm past you. I'm way past you. So we've knocked out about 140 episodes now, huh?
Yeah, that's about right. That doesn't include some of the test episodes we did and some of the running through the process that we did at the very beginning.
Oh, and I forgot about the youth episodes too.
That's right. With the youth episodes, now we're pushing, I guess you can say 142, 143 maybe.
Well, yeah, and I've got some recording this week, and so we're pushing 150 here pretty soon. Yeah, so that's pretty good. So tell them about what goes on when I turn it over to you is when everything starts, and that's when And next week we'll tell you how I get to that point. But I turn over an MP3 file completely edited to Larry. So Larry, take it from there. What do you do with it?
Okay. So there is a what we call the wall between Tom and myself. Tom takes the MP3 file, throws it over the wall. I'm on the other side of that wall and I catch it. Once I get that file, a whole bunch of things start to go into play. Now, what I'm going to describe to you may sound like a lot, but once you get a process started and you get into the rhythm of this, as I have after close to now 140 episodes, you'll see that it really isn't that much, but you need to have a process. And I'll go through that as I'm describing this.
Yeah,
so
before you take off with this, though, I just want to remind people, folks, I put the word quality podcast here because you can turn out a podcast in an hour and have it up on the web. I mean, you can use anchor.fm and just slop something out there. So what I'm describing here and all these hoops we jump through is because we want a high quality podcast. So if you want to compete at the highest levels, this is the things you do. If you just want to get something out there or play around with it, you don't have to do all this stuff. But if you want to play in the big leagues, this is what we do. Go ahead.
Yeah, so that's absolutely true. But there are a couple of elements that we all have to keep in mind, regardless of whether we go the quick and dirty route or we go the high quality route. I've done a couple of these on Anchor FM using my iPhone. And for the purposes that I had, perfectly fine. But to be able to do something at the level of Screw the Commute, I would never go that route. So there are plenty of paths you can take in order to do this. So let's just start off with some basic definitions here. So what the heck is a podcast? For most of us, especially this old decrepit guy, I didn't know what a podcast was. If you can look up the words, you get all sorts of crazy definitions. It used to be called a netcast for network broadcast. The part of the word pod was supposedly from Apple because of their creation of the iPod. There's a whole bunch of definitions. Today, what it comes down to is it's something you can download or you can stream live onto any device that can provide audio information that you're looking for, that you're interested in. That's pretty much what it boils down to.
Yeah, and then here's the definition I've been using for a long time. It's basically an audio file, but podcast is just the way it's delivered. It's still an audio file that you could just play on your own computer for your own listening purposes, but the way it's delivered makes it a podcast. It's cast out into the world. Like a lot of people can hook up their iPhone and then their latest podcast would be all downloaded to their phone as they picked it up and went to work that morning. So that's the delivery method, not necessarily, it's just still an audio file.
Yep, that's what it comes down to. It's still an audio file because you could take that audio file, put it on a website somewhere, and just download it and listen to it.
Mm-hmm.
And you're essentially doing that as well. But that definition works, especially in today's world where everything is so hyper-connected that you don't really have to, quote-unquote, download anything. It all happens behind the scenes. So that audio file, the very first thing that I do is I take a quick run through it and listen to it in order to create show notes. So why do we do this? Well, the first thing you're going to discover is that show notes are an incredibly valuable piece of information for the listener and also for the person who's actually doing the podcast. So what I do is I run through the audio file from start to finish to make sure it sounds good, that there are no glitches in it, and knock on wood, right? That's that sound you're hearing. I'm knocking on wood. In all of the podcasts we've done so far, we have yet to have a glitch in what Tom generates and throws over the wall. Now, that doesn't mean we don't have audio, which is a little bit flaky and stuff. We do get that, but no glitches. So when you download the podcast and play it on your favorite device using your podcast player of choice, it sounds exactly as you would want it to sound. Tom's melodious tones and the guest coming through loud and clear, providing whatever information they're providing.
And of course, we'll talk about that next week because I go over every second of it as in the editing process. So I want to give him something that he can use, not that's half-baked.
Right, exactly. And the way I have this set up is if I do run into a glitch like that, it's an immediate response back to Tom to say, hey, check this out here because this doesn't sound right. And we haven't had that yet.
Well, no, but we have had some weird stuff that we still haven't figured out. Like,
yes.
Like the thing with the ID 3 tags says this is genre the blues.
Yeah. Actually, I did find out about
did you
that.
find out?
Yeah, I did. I finally
You
found
didn't
this
tell
just
me.
a couple of days ago. I wasn't really sure if that was the actual answer, but I think it is.
All right. Well,
What
we don't need to get into that here. So.
Yeah, we don't have to,
Okay.
but there are little technical things in the background that things like this come up. It doesn't affect the quality of the podcast, but it may affect other things like being able to find it, the type of genre it falls under, and the like. So I review that audio file. I create the show notes, and the show notes are usually they contain three elements. One is just the basic description of the podcast, the links and any other information that either the host or the guest provide in the podcast that a listener would want to go to. So it's links to their website, links to other resources, and that kind of thing. And most importantly, for many of our listeners, the timestamps of all the important points within the podcast. So at the very beginning, Tom will introduce a given guest, or if he's doing a training session, he'll introduce that training session. I've got a timestamp for that. Bring it up in our podcast app. You'll see that there's an actual time code, minutes and seconds of where this starts. So if you've already listened to the podcast or you're so anxious to get to a particular section, you can jump to that time code and be able to start listening at that point.
So we're making it really easy for people to use the show notes.
Exactly.
And we use some kind of plugin for that, right?
Yes, there is a plugin called the Smart Podcast Player. And what that will do is produce an actual player on the website, the screwthecommute.com website, which actually looks at those time codes. So you can click on the time code that you're interested in, let's say at 15 minutes, 20 seconds, and the player will automatically jump to that point and start playing at that given time code. So you can bounce around a podcast. You can listen to the whole thing from start to finish.
Are you
go back
saying
and
you're
review.
putting in the time codes, or it generates them automatically and then you adjust them, or what?
No, I put them in myself as I'm listening to the podcast.
All right.
Now, sometimes I have to adjust them because there could be a tiny bit of overlap between, let's say, your voice and the guest's voice.
Right.
So I adjust them a couple of seconds either way, so that when the listener clicks on it, they get at the very beginning of that particular section.
Okay, good.
But yeah, those are manually generated. However, what happens is the player itself will automatically generate the necessary code so that the timestamp click works. So you'll be able to actually jump there.
Yeah, you tell it 2 minutes and 10 seconds, and then when somebody clicks on 2 minutes and 10 seconds, the player jumps exactly to 2 minutes and 10 seconds. So
correct. That's how it works. So once I do that, once the audio file's been vetted and I've got a set of show notes, then my workflow begins. That's actually the beginning of my process, my workflow. So what does that actually mean? Anytime you hear the word workflow, you think of a set of processes starting from A and going from there, or starting from 1. So it's step 1. Get the audio file from Tom, start listening to it. Step 2, generate show notes. Step 3, test to make sure that the time codes that I put in there are accurate, as close as possible to where the actual information starts, and so on and so on and so on. So once you generate a workflow, it makes it relatively easy to run any new podcast episode through this process. So we've generated the show notes. Once I've generated the show notes, I take a look and see what has to happen next in order to get that available for other people to listen to. One of the things we use is a podcast. The generic term is a podcast distribution network. It's a big highfalutin word for a place that holds your podcasts. So there are a couple of ways you can do this. You can actually put that audio file up on a website. People can download it and listen to it from there. If you only have a few audio files, it's not a big deal.
A few listeners too.
And a few listeners too. Exactly. One of the problems you run into, and you'll run into it very, very quickly, is that as the popularity of your podcast grows, so will the bandwidth you're using, so will the amount of downloads, and also so will your cost. Because most website host providers or service providers are going to charge you based on the amount of megabytes, gigabytes, downloads, and all that stuff that's being used on your website. So it's very rarely a good idea to do this from a website that you create.
Yeah, unless it's really pitiful and you're just doing it for fun, because you could get a bill for $1,000 or just get kicked off your hosting service.
That's right.
And
yes.
it's crazy with how cheap it is to go to the right kind of places.
Exactly. A lot of these places got terms of service that if you exceed the bandwidth cap, is what they call it, they'll just cut you off. And you may have seen this already because sometimes you'll go to a website and it says service unavailable. And it says the website at this address has exceeded its bandwidth cap for the month. You're really SOL at that point. You're really out of luck.
You look stupid. I mean, it's just stupid. For $5 a month, you could fix this whole problem.
Exactly right. So we use a service called Libsyn, LIBSYN.com, and all of this will be in the show notes because I am going to create them for this particular episode. So Libsyn is the big kahuna. It's the 800-pound gorilla in the podcast space. And we use them, and I can tell you, after all of these episodes and going back and forth with their support for a couple of issues here and there, it is rock solid. Absolutely rock solid.
It's unbelievably cheap.
Yeah, it really is. You can pay as little, as you mentioned before, Tom, $5 a month to get started.
Yeah, and all the super, super big popular podcasts use this service. Now, there's others. Yeah, there's others. We'll tell you some names of others.
Yeah, I mean, there are others. There's Stitcher, there's Spotify, there's iHeartRadio, SoundCloud, Blueberry. That's Blueberry without the E's. Just take the E's out.
Right.
Castbox. There's a zillion of these. And they all have their pluses and minuses. They all have their pros and cons. But here's the one thing about Libsyn. Libsyn is one of the very few that will feed. Oh, I can't forget iTunes. iTunes is the second big kahuna, the second 800-pound gorilla in this whole thing. What Libsyn will do is feed all of these services. So by using a site like Libsyn, and there are alternatives to Libsyn, but Libsyn is pretty much the big one. They handle all of this for you. They'll be able to feed Spotify. They can feed Stitcher. They can feed Podcast Blaster. And we just recently signed up for radio.com.
20 or 25 places that you could listen to Screw the Commute.
Yeah, exactly. And there are more coming online. Just like the other day, I recently put us in for radio.com.
Right.
So that's in the progress right now. So this is an ever-changing landscape, and it takes a lot to really keep up with all that's going on. But using a service like Libsyn gives us the ability to feed Libsyn our audio file and all the notes and everything else we have to give them, and they take care of the rest in the back end. And to use a term that Tom uses and that I use a lot, it's dirt cheap.
Mm-hmm.
It really is dirt cheap considering what you're getting.
We pay $20, I think, for
that is correct. Yes,
$20 a month. 400 megabytes a month, and once in a while I'll go over and have to pay an extra $5. But I mean, that's 12 podcasts a month. That's a lot.
Yeah, right. If on a typical month, that's 12 podcasts a month, unless you have a special, like a youth episode, or there's something else going on that you throw an extra one in there. But yeah, we can fit in just about a month's worth of podcasts and that $20. How could you go wrong with that?
Yeah.
It's such a cheap amount of money. So there are lots of choices in that field and in that realm to get you started and to allow you to continue to build on that. So if you're really on a tight budget, how can you beat $5 a month? It speaks to what's available now on the internet. This is 2019.
Yeah, and clearly, if you try to do this on your website, it's going to cost you more than $5 for sure. If you have any number of downloads, and then you're going to have the potential of getting cut off, and it's not optimized for streaming this stuff. There's never a glitch with Libsyn or these big podcasts highly optimized for streaming, where your website, if you're on a cheap GoDaddy or some cheap hosting stuff for $5 a month, it's not optimized for this, and there could be 10,000 other people on there on your same hosting computer slowing it and making it glitchy, and you're just going to look stupid. So there's no question that this is ridiculous if you don't do something like Libsyn.
Well, I think just from a value standpoint, I can guarantee you that if you do it on your own without using a company like Libsyn, you'll be paying a lot more than $5 a month right off the bat.
Yeah, and you won't
That's
get
just
the
way
statistics and all the stuff that they give you. It's just crazy. And you'd be trying to do it by hand to distribute to 20 places.
Well, that's the other thing. And that goes back to what I was mentioning before about workflow. You will be doing a lot more manual work in order to make sure that this gets out by doing it yourself. There's no way you can justify the ROI on doing it for yourself. So that's why we take advantage of these distribution networks like Libsyn to make sure that it gets out to all the different places that it has to get out. If you're doing it just for the heck of it and you want to put out a crappy podcast, you can do it on your own. But for listeners of this podcast, I would be hard pressed to find anybody who would want to do it that way.
Yeah, and one other nice thing about Libsyn, they have their own podcast that for podcasters. And I was featured on there. You can just ask them and they'll feature you on their podcast in front of thousands of other podcasters. And it keep you up to date on changes and things that are happening. So yeah, it's just crazy not to do this. All right.
Okay. So along with the audio file and then along with the workflow. So let's get back to the workflow just for a second. So this is part of the plan. Part of the plan in order to get you to do a podcast, in order to do this effectively, is you have to lay it out ahead of time as to what exactly you want to do. So one of the things we decided to do up front was to make sure we had show notes, which were comprehensive enough that the listeners could take advantage of it, but not so overwhelming that they would just throw their hands up and give up. Because I've seen other show notes from other podcasts, which are really rather skimpy, like it's just a couple of lines, just a description of the podcast, which really doesn't help. And I've seen others that have gone the actual opposite way, that are just so detailed, it's almost like eye-popping. So I think we've picked a pretty good middle ground in order to provide our listeners with what they're looking for, and also at the same time to be respectful to the guest that's on that episode, showing their website address, all the resources they have available, what they're offering for the listeners, if there's any specials, things of that nature. So that's part of that workflow, is to really be able to understand exactly what you're trying to present, when you want to present it, how you want to present it, and then using a service like Libsyn in order to present that audio file to the masses all over planet Earth. So the workflow itself starts from the time he throws it over the wall till the time you download it, you, the listener, who's listening to this right now, to the listener who's downloading it to their device and listening to the podcast. So having a plan, even a rudimentary one, even if it's just step 1, step 2, step 3, and you write it on a back of a napkin, that's probably 90% more than most people do. So it's something that you really need to take seriously. This way, you don't drive yourself crazy. And more importantly, you don't miss any steps. Because one of the things I've discovered since we started doing this at the very beginning, that if you try and take a shortcut, it's going to come back and bite you. And it could come back and bite you pretty bad. So don't take shortcuts. This is not the kind of thing you want to take a shortcut on. Fortunately, we've been able to maneuver around some of the things we had to do at the beginning since we were brand new at this. But I think we've got a pretty good flow now and a lot of experience that shows where the pitfalls are and how to maneuver around them to present a well-produced podcast episode every episode.
All right. What's next? What's the next thing you do?
Okay. So one of the things I want to harp on, because I've harped on this before in other conversations we've had, is audio quality. Tom's audio file can only be good as the audio quality that's in it. You could have the best guest in the world. Tom could be at his absolute peak as a host, asking the right questions and all that stuff. But if your setup on the other side is just lousy, it's going to sound lousy. Tom has got all sorts of crazy stuff going on over there. That's why his audio sounds so good.
Yeah, and I'm going to cover that. It's also covered in the freebie. If you go and get that screwthecommute.com/automate free, that's the automation book, but the extra freebie covers all the stuff that I use equipment-wise and everything in there.
Yep, definitely worth getting, because it gives you a really good idea of what you would need to do and what you need to get in order to make this quality. So,
let me make a distinction there. If you're only doing yourself and not doing guests that aren't like sitting in your living room with you, this can be way easier equipment-wise, but you have to come up with all the material yourself. If you're going to do guests, that's when the equipment goes a little bit crazy, because you got to, I'll cover it more next week, but you can start if you're just doing your own without interviewing, for just a decent microphone, USB microphone, and some audio software. So you don't have to go full blast until you're ready to do interviews.
And you know what? That's not a bad way to start either.
Right.
Because that'll give you at least a little bit of experience using your own equipment, getting a feel for how the flow of a podcast actually works. Like Tom, when you do your training sessions, it's just you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Well, this one is going to, I'd had Mark on for video, and
right.
I'll have Lakia on for social media on a Monday are my training sessions. And yet this is what you're on today, is the Monday. But still, the bulk of them, like 100 and, out of 130 episodes, I don't know however many weeks that is, once a week, it was just me. So you don't have to have the super equipment for that. But when you're doing interviews, it gets crazy.
Yes. So that's why audio from a quality standpoint is critical. And even for yourself as a guest, you want the audio as good as it could possibly be, so that your guests that your listeners will want to come back and listen to more. I've heard many podcasts where the audio is just so bad.
Well, and also if you are going on a podcast tour, which I have been doing, where I'm on other people's podcasts, the better you sound, the more likely they're going to be to invite you back, the more professional you sound. So if you use your own equipment for that rather than just getting on a telephone or something, you'll be invited back more often, and you'll sound more professional out there when people are listening.
Yes, telephones, cheap headsets, those little boom microphones that you could pick up for $5 online. Those are all terrible.
Yeah, I'll get into that next week. All right, so what's the next part of your flow?
Okay, so we have show notes. We've got our stuff uploaded to Libsyn. We have a distribution network all set up and ready to go. All right, the next thing, you need a central hub. You need a place where your listeners can go to find everything about your podcast and anything else you're actually doing, for that matter. That's why you need to have a website to do this. So at screwthecommute.com, that is our central hub for all the podcast activity for the Screw the Commute podcast, for the Screw the Commute community, and so on and so on. Tom has all sorts of stuff up there for people, resources and the like. We have not only the show notes from Libsyn that I generate, but far more extensive show notes that have images, video, other audio content, links to PDFs, and so on and so on and so on.
And affiliate links,
right?
You got to make money with this, folks. If you're going to put this kind of investment in, you got to have a mechanism to make money. So, and a lot of affiliate links are too weird to say on the podcast, so you need to have them where somebody can just click on them if you're going to do affiliate marketing. And then also just even for my own products and stuff. So I'm not using the model that a lot of beginning podcasters do. They try to get sponsors. And what happens, folks, is you only get anywhere from $10 to $25 per 1,000 downloads. And it's not easy to get 1,000 downloads right off the bat, let me tell you.
No, it isn't.
But if you promote your own product, see, I've been the sponsor of every single podcast, one of my products. So I get all the money. See, so that's kind of the model that we use here. We don't try to get sponsors and get a few dollars here and there. We want to promote, get people to buy my stuff and get in my database. But show notes are where you can have all that stuff that's easy to click, because people are driving or on the train or something may not be able to easily click over to anything, but the show notes does it. And then you're going to talk about transcripts too, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. All right.
So speaking of clicking over on show notes and stuff, that's one of the things I'll talk about in a minute. So the website having all the extensive show notes with video and images and other content and these links, and your affiliate links look pretty weird. So you're better off having a link. Saying it on the actual podcast really doesn't help. That's why we do all the links we put in those show notes. So what happens is the website becomes a one-stop shop. Tom can just mention very simply, go to the screwthecommute.com website. You'll find all the information there. And sure enough, there it is. It just makes it very, very easy.
I've said it a couple times already today.
That's right.
Screwthecommute.com/app to download our app for your tablet or your cell phone. Screwthecommute.com/automate free. That's where you get your freebie for listening and your extra freebie for the podcasting. And so we got screwthecommute.com/webinars, screwthecommute.com/resources. And there's individual sales letters up there for individual products. So I've moved a lot of stuff off of my old sites because of the Screw the Commute site is fully responsive, which means it works on a cell phone and tablet. Where some of my older sites, I would just have a skinny sales letter, but now it's all modernized. We're moving everything into that hub so that it's all easily accessed on a cell phone or a tablet.
Yeah, and that all comes under the term of integration. You'll see that term a lot all over the place. I'm integrating with this one's integrating with that. We're integrating all of our information in one central place. And that's what the website provides us. Now, Tom mentioned a couple of other elements that you'll find up on the website. We have things like upcoming guests. It's one thing to be able to put podcast episodes up there after the fact. But what we try and do as we're lining up guests and getting ready to make their episodes, we put the list of upcoming guests that are coming up in the near future, the next week, the next couple of weeks and the like. So you can see who's coming up and prepare for that. So it's an ongoing revolving thing.
And I usually don't put them up or give them to Larry until they're already recorded, because people cancel on you or
Right.
reschedule. And then so I don't even give them to Larry until I've already got it in the can. I may not have edited it yet, but it's still recorded.
Yeah, and I need that because I put episode numbers up there, so I know that that's locked in for a particular date.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that could always change if some emergency comes up or something else happens, but for the most part, when you see up on upcoming guests, is pretty much what the schedule is going to be. The other thing you'll find up there are Tom's appearances on other podcasts, which is just as important. So if you're doing, as Tom mentioned earlier, a podcast tour, you want everybody to know who goes to the website, where else have I been?
And also, if a podcast host didn't know you and you send them to there and they say, oh my God, look, he was on Entrepreneur on Fire and Conscious Millionaire and all these big shows, then they're more excited to book you.
Yes, exactly. And we add to that as well on a regular basis as Tom continues to do his podcast tour. And
one little tip there, I put the biggest shows at the top, and then we put a list of all shows underneath that so that they're hit right in the face. I don't want them, I'll do all kinds of shows, but I don't want to have 2 listener show as the top one when somebody hits the page. So I put all the big shows at the top, and then I do a full listing by date below that.
Right. And as of right now, I'm looking through the page itself. You've got multiple pages here of recent appearances.
Right.
So there's a lot of stuff up here. And usually if I can provide them, I'll put links up there with the actual link to that particular episode so that anybody who shows up there and looks at that page can see that and go directly there.
Yeah. And another thing we do is on bigger shows, we'll give the host a complete page on Screw the Commute, so that they feel like, wow, this guy is really a great guest. He's professional. He's doing everything possible to promote his appearance on my show. And so they want you back. So I'm going to be back on another major show. I won't say the name of it yet until it's actually done. Normally they only have people once, and that's it. So I made so much money for this guy in affiliate commissions because I gave him an affiliate commission. That's another thing behind the scenes. If you're going to do a podcast tour, we're getting off topic a little bit here, but it's all important because you have to make money with this, folks. So if you get bigger hosts to put you in front of their audience, you make sure they get paid for it if possible with an affiliate program, an affiliate commission. So this one guy's made $5,000 off of my appearance so far, and it's going to go towards around 8,000. And so I was talking to him the other day. Yeah, let's have you back here pretty soon.
Gee, I wonder why. Why would he want you back?
See, so you got to be professional about this if you want to maximize everything. And part of that is a podcast tour, but you take care of your podcast hosts. And we have specific pages so that whenever, and it's already made before I do the recording. So when I do the recording, I say, yeah, go over to so-and-so.com. Or screwthecommute.com/ and then whatever the show name is that I'm on. And then that guy's or woman's pictures at the top of the page, right. And the freebie that I'm giving away that they have to opt in for, that's got an affiliate link attached to it so that anybody that comes from that person's show, he gets cookied or she gets cookied and they make money from me. See? So these are all behind the scenes things, that make a profitable podcast.
And also on those pages, we also include links to all the different services that I mentioned earlier, so that you can easily find this particular podcast, and you could also listen to other episodes of that particular show.
Yep.
So it makes it very convenient and very easy for them to do that. So it really, as Tom mentioned, it really shows a level of professionalism that we're taking the time to do this, and it's always done ahead of time. This way, when they go there, The page is already there. And people can see that, wow, this guy really knows his stuff and he's right on top of things. So we have host pages. We've got upcoming guests.
Now, we also have a page for me, like almost like an about page for me to all the cool stuff I've done in my life, like 20 things you didn't know about Tom Antion and funny guest will make money for your show.
Tom, I have to correct you. It's 22 things we didn't know.
22. Okay. Everything to show how I'm going to take care of their audience. I'm going to customize for them. And, that's how you get on the better shows, because a lot of guests they don't do anything. They just entitled, they think, I'll just show up and just talk a little bit. No, I want that person to know this guy's a pro. He's going to make my show look great and potentially make me a lot of money. So
exactly.
Yeah.
And just to make sure this is in the show notes, it's screwthecommute.com/about. And you'll see Tom's smiling face in the picture right at the top of the page.
Is that the page? I thought we'd have one for podcast hosts or something.
No, well, for you, it's about, because it's about you.
Yeah, but I think we have a specific page it's called podcast hosts. I think that's the link. We'll get the right link for the show notes, but that's where if I'm talking to somebody, I send them there to show them to let them read all the topics that I have. And
yes, that's it. Yeah. It's screwthecommute.com/podcast hosts.
Plural, right?
So I'll make sure that is in the show notes as well.
Yeah.
And again, it shows your smiling face. You're always smiling.
Yeah. Oh, I'm a happy guy.
Why not, right?
Yeah.
So we have all of those. We have giveaways. There's sales letters, as Tom mentioned before. There's also a resources page, which is very extensive, which has all sorts of resources on there that you can take advantage of. And
many of them are affiliates, and many of them are my specific products.
We have internet marketing links. We have entrepreneurship links, public speaking links, copywriting, miscellaneous,
and a lot of free stuff too. A lot of free webinars and all kinds of stuff. So so now and when he gets into talking about transcripts, this site is becoming really enormous very quickly, because each time I do a podcast, there's 6, 8, 10 pages of text that's going on my site 3 times a week, which
10. That's on the low side.
Well, yeah. So it makes you look great to the search engines too.
Well, that just happened to be the next thing I was going to mention. So let's talk about it.
All right.
So I have show notes generated. I've got an audio file. I have Libsyn all primed and ready to go. So let's talk about transcripts. One of the things that I noticed long before we started doing this, and before I got deeply involved in the back end of Screw the Commute podcast, is
Yeah, I'm glad you said deeply involved in the back end of Screw the Commute and not deeply involved in the back end of Tom.
Yeah, I did avoid that. Thank you for noticing. So one of the things that I did notice is that it's either a lack of transcripts, meaning the show host does not offer transcripts at all, or they only provide certain sections within the transcript that either contains a link or something else like that. In other words, not very satisfying. Let's just put it that way from a listener standpoint. So what Tom uses is a service called Sonix. That's Sonix. It's actually sonix.ai. This will be in the show notes. You can rest assured of that.
And I got an affiliate link, so don't go to Sonix.ai. Go to my affiliate link.
Right. I'll make sure to have the link in the show notes.
You'll get 30 minutes free. Yep. But tell them all about that.
Okay. So Sonix is a transcription service where you upload an audio file, and it accepts a variety of audio file formats. It doesn't have to be MP3. They'll accept a whole bunch of things. They will also accept stereo audio files, meaning if you've got 2 people talking on a podcast and you separate out the channels between the guest and the host, it can actually process the transcription so that it can label who's talking about what. So that's another thing that they do, which a lot of other transcription services don't. And what they do is they'll upload the audio file, they'll grind it around in the background, and after about 5, 10, depending on the size of the podcast episode, maybe 15 minutes, it's done transcribing. And what you get is a pretty good representation of what was spoken about on that particular audio file. Now, it's not 100% perfect. None of these transcriptions probably will ever be, but it comes pretty close. Our average, I'm going to say, is about 90, 91%. Sonix is confident that about 91% of the transcript that it generated, it caught correctly. And after doing all of these episodes at this point, I have to agree with them. Their percentage is pretty close. So you're going to have to do a little bit of editing. Sometimes it doesn't get names exactly right. The links sometimes get a little mangled because of the way they're spoken. But for the most part, it is a great way to convert your audio into the written word. So you can provide that transcript on your website through different medium, through different methods in order to have it as a complement to the audio file.
All right, let me jump in here. In here. See, folks, the reason I'm so psyched about this transcription service is that I used to pay a minimum of $30 per recorded hour and frequently $60 per recorded hour, and had to wait a minimum of 24 hours and most of the time 2-3 days to get it back. This is $5 per recorded hour, and it's back in 10 minutes. It's just crazy. It's crazy.
You can't beat that. You just can't.
And in the show notes, we'll put this this Camtasia video, screen capture video I do showing you how it works and everything. And so if you sign up through my affiliate link, you get 30 free minutes. But for everybody I get to sign up, I get 100 free minutes. So for virtually all of these 140 podcasts, which are anywhere from 30 to a little bit over an hour, I've only paid a couple dollars for 140 episodes of transcripts, right? Just because I was an affiliate. And I don't get paid in money, I get paid in free minutes. So it's really, and you could do the same thing too.
Yeah, and it's all web-based, so you don't have to worry about downloading anything to your PC or your Mac or any of that stuff. Everything is web-based. You simply drag and drop the audio file, it uploads it, you click the transcribe button, and off it goes. It also handles multiple languages. It's got a custom dictionary. It does, as I mentioned earlier, multi-track uploading. There's all sorts of stuff that this thing provides. And it really is an inexpensive way in order to do this. There is no way you could have somebody else do this for you for that price point.
Right. Exactly.
Not possible. Just not possible. So it's not 100%, but it comes really, really close. So you're going to get a high quality transcript out of that you could repurpose for whatever you want to do out of it. And just keep in mind, and there's a really important part to this that a lot of people don't think of. So let me say this now. Your audience is comprised of a whole bunch of different people. People that are audio listeners, people that are quote unquote visual listeners. What's a visual listener? Well, somebody who can look at listen to the podcast, but they really get a lot more out of it by reading the transcript. And there are some people that are like a hybrid. They'll actually follow along with the transcript as they're listening to the podcast. So there's plenty of different types of listeners out there that you want to appeal to. Not everybody is a complete audio listener. They want other types of medium to actually look at that. I know we get a lot of people that view our show notes on the screwthecommute.com website. They're looking for the different videos that are up there. They're looking at the different images that are up there. There's a whole bunch of ways to attract and keep those listeners. And this transcript function using Sonics is just another way to do that.
And I think we make them opt in for the transcript, right?
That is correct. Yeah, you provide your name and your email address, and then you get access to the transcript.
Right. You don't have to do that just to look at the show notes, but to get the full transcript, it's a way to build your list.
Right. Exactly. And that's available right there on the website. You don't have to do a download. You don't have to wait for a file to show up in your email. Once you opt in, bang, the transcript is available right there on the show notes page for that particular episode. Mm-hmm. So there's no waiting, because Tom doesn't like to wait, and neither do I.
Right.
Okay.
All right, tell them about our app.
Okay, so that's coming. That's right here in my list. Okay, so the app. We have an app which is provided by Libsyn. So this is one of the reasons why you want to use a service like Libsyn, because they do provide a whole bunch of other things that you could use in order to promote your podcast, in order to keep engaged with your listeners, and so on and so on and so on. So what is this app? They have an app for the Apple platform as well as the Android platform. So all of your iPhones, your iPads, iPods, all of that stuff.
Okay, hold on a second. So if you do hear howling in the background, it's not me so excited about the app. We have all these dogs here. So I think they're excited about it. So if you do hear some howling,
the parade of 30 dogs that you have there?
Yeah, there's about 30 dogs here today. Yeah, so go ahead.
Okay, maybe they're excited about the app.
Yeah,
Who
that's
knows?
what I'm saying, yeah.
Okay, so why an app? Why do you have to have an app? There's a lot of, at first I thought the same thing. Why do we really need a separate app for this? It turns out, yes, you really do. And there's a lot of good reasons for it. One of the main reasons why we have a Screw the Commute app is to make sure that our listeners are engaged, and it's also good for branding. Because I'm looking at my phone right now, and on there is the Screw the Commute app, and it says Screw the Commute, and all I have to do is tap on that app, and up comes the latest episodes of the Screw the Commute podcast. I have a little Screwy there. His image comes up, and simply by swiping on there, I get a download of all the episodes that have been in our feed since the very beginning, and any new ones that have been put in will show up immediately as soon as I open the app. So it's a great way to keep all of these episodes in one place. Now, keep in mind, Tom does a training episode every Monday. These are the types of training episodes you don't listen to once, and that's the last time you ever listen to them. They are chock full of information, way too much for just one listen, even with show notes and transcripts. So these are the kind of things where you can pull up that particular episode you want to listen to again, run it right through the app, and out it comes, out of your iPhone, out of your Android device, out of your tablet, and that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think if I recall, it only cost $99 for them to develop it for me, and I just had to provide the graphics that they told me what to provide. So you can't go to an app developer and say, "Oh yeah, what can I get for $100?" And they'll say like nothing.
Yeah, maybe this conversation. That's about it. Yeah, so the app is definitely worth it, and there's a couple of other things that go along with that, which make it even more enticing. I mentioned show notes, links, and all that stuff. I can have those links that you see on our website, the screwthecommute.com website, are in this app. So I'm looking at one of our latest episodes, and there's all clickable links here. All you have to do is tap the link. It will open up in another window and show you the content on that particular website. So this is a great way to have your audience engaged, all the listeners, to make sure that they take advantage of these resources and everything else that's part of that episode. So even if they're on the go and they're pretty much a mobile type person, they can still take advantage of these links, especially affiliate links and all sorts of other things that come along with that. So there's special features that you can put in there. There are links to other mentioned resources. Also the fact that once you put the app in there and you start downloading, you don't have to worry about downloading another episode again because it's done automatically. So you don't have to worry. Is it Monday? Oh yeah. Does Tom have an episode today? Yeah, he might. You don't have to worry about that. The episode automatically shows up.
Yeah. So doesn't it do a thing like if you're in the car listening?
Oh yeah.
You get a phone call. Tell them about that.
Okay. So one of the features of this app, which I think is the coolest thing, one of the coolest things, is it has what's called car mode. So what's been happening lately, in the past 2 years, I'd say there's been a real push to get devices like your iPhone, your Android device, and everything else more car friendly. What does that mean? That means that it provides the least amount of distractions when you're driving. So one of the things that this app does, say you're listening to this episode right now in your car, if you get a phone call during this episode, the app will pause the episode, allow your phone to take the call. When you're done and you hang up, the episode picks up exactly from where it left off without you having to do a thing. You don't even have to touch the device, and it does this all on its own. Also, the app itself has a built-in car mode where you can actually lock the screen so that the episode will continue to play and you won't be distracted by things beeping on your phone or any type of notifications or any of that stuff. And it gives you very simplified controls that allow you to control the device even while you're in the car. So for the most part, it's hands off. And that's a great thing because we want that. We want people focusing on the road. We don't want to lose any listeners because of car accidents. So we want to make sure that they're getting the best experience out of this. And this app provides that as well.
You know what would be a cool news story, though, is if both people in the car accident, both cars hit each other and they were both listening to Screw the Commute. that would be kind of a sick way of promotion, because you shouldn't have been commuting anyway, and then you wouldn't have gotten the car accident.
There you go. See that? And you'd have media all over your compound over there.
Yeah.
That would actually be pretty funny. Not for the people involved, but it would be pretty funny.
All right.
Okay.
So we
So
got,
that's
then what do you do?
all right. Okay. So we have transcripts. We've got the app. We've got our show notes. We've got everything else. Okay. What's next? Social media. This is the one thing that a lot of people forget. And I've seen this time and time again with podcasts that seem to have great audience numbers and all that stuff. They drop the ball when it comes to social media. And at this point in the 21st century, that should not be the case. So what do I mean? We have a Screw the Commute Facebook group. In fact, we have 2 Screw the Commute Facebook groups. We have a Twitter account. We have an Instagram account. We're working on Snapchat, looking at Pinterest. There's a whole bunch of things you can do on social media.
YouTube also,
yes.
We turn the audio into a video.
Yep.
Even though I don't record in video, we can still plaster the audio on top of a video.
That's right. So you're making a video podcast out of it, for lack of a better term at this point. But the one thing that really should be done is, I'll give you an example. Our Facebook group, Screw the Commute Facebook group, it's got a lot of people in there. There's a lot of chatter going back and forth on a daily basis. There's a lot of stuff that we talk about in there that you won't find anywhere else.
That's the paid.
That's the paid group. But even if you don't have a paid group, even if it's a free Facebook group, you still want to be able to reach out to your audience in a manner that they are accustomed to. And many people are still using Facebook. The demographics of Facebook have changed, like the age ranges and stuff. Old decrepit guys like me, I'm still on Facebook. It's just a fact. That's just where we are. I'm also on Twitter. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Snapchat. I'm all over the place. That's just the way I roll. But for your podcast, you should be rolling the exact same way. It costs you zero to set up a Facebook group that promotes your podcast. You invite people in. You send out an email to your email list. You do have an email list, don't you? And then invite them into the Facebook group, and you have another way of communicating with your listeners and another community that interfaces with you in order to promote your podcast and to grow it. Twitter is the same thing. Instagram is the same thing. There are so many things you can do in order to promote, in order to get the word out, in order to keep people engaged. The real thing here is engagement. I lost count of the number of podcasts I used to listen to that I thought were pretty good, but there was absolutely zero engagement. No outreach by the host, no real resources available, nothing on Facebook really to write home about, zero appearances on Twitter, that kind of thing. And yeah, it is a little bit of work, but you're trying to make something here that's worthwhile for yourself and for your listeners. So you want to make it that they feel comfortable coming in, joining your group, following you on Twitter and so on, to build up that audience, to build up your listeners, and to make sure that your podcast keeps growing and growing and growing. I just went back and took a look at our numbers from Libsyn. And from the time we started to right now, in terms of audience growth, we've had hundreds and hundreds of % growth since the very, very beginning. And just as an example, this is only June 2nd as we're recording this. And the download numbers for June are already several hundred downloads. And that's only less than 48 hours. So these are the types of numbers you can have once you build up an audience, and using all of social media as well in order to do that. It doesn't cost anything. The only thing it'll cost you is time. But once you set it up, a lot of times Facebook groups, they take off on their own. For example, I'm an admin for our Screw the Commute Facebook group. So Tom does not have to be in there all the time, checking things out, answering questions and all that stuff. Myself and one other admin can handle that. And if anything needs to rise to his level, we make sure that he gets a hold of that and he comes in where appropriate. So there's a lot of ways to do this. There's no reason not to be on social media at this point, because it really does help. Okay, so one of the other things that goes along with that, we're talking about social media and reaching out to your listeners and to growing your audience, is reaching out to your guests. One of the most very important aspects of my job as the back end guy for the Screw the Commute podcast is making sure that I keep an open line of communication with the guests that Tom books. It is extremely important. It's beyond important, actually. You need to keep a channel open with your guests to get the things that you need, like, just for example, headshots. We get headshots on a regular basis, so we can include them in our show notes, in our podcast player, on the Screw the Commute app, and so on. We want to make sure we get the best headshot. I don't necessarily like to use Google Images to try and pull out something from there because it's not normally the best headshot we can get. I'd rather get it from the guest. So it's important to keep that channel open. I also need show notes approval. I want to make sure that the show notes I've generated, especially the links that they mention in the podcast, are correct for them. And there have been times where there have been changes between the time they recorded the podcast and the time it went live. So I've made those changes to the show notes. I want to make sure that if there are any affiliate links that they'd like to provide for the listeners, that those get into the show notes as well.
Also, I tell them they can update their show notes if they have something else they want to promote, because these podcasts have a long life. So they might have some other new thing, and I just as soon they come back, put it in the show notes there, and that'll give them another excuse to tell people about the podcast.
Yep, absolutely. And I've gotten that. I've actually gotten follow-up emails from several of our guests where they said, it's not ready right now, whatever it is. When the link is ready, I'll let you know. And sure enough, there's the link. I update the show notes and it's in. It's both on our website and in the app. So this is an ongoing process. Communicating with the guests is an extremely important part of this, not only for their products and services, but just it promotes a certain level of professionalism, and it shows that the way Tom has set this up, that this is not a fly-by-night thing. He's in it for the long haul. This is a professionally run podcast, and we do things that are beneficial to both us and to the guests as well. One of the other things that I make sure that the guests understand is when their podcast is going to go live. A lot of the guests kind of forget. Sometimes they record the podcast. It's not going to be live for a couple of weeks. Sometimes it's delayed even further because of other things going on. And we understand that the guests have busy lives. So I make sure that I ping them on a regular basis. Say, hey, listen, just want to let you know your podcast is going to be going live on this date. Here's some resources you can use to promote it on social media, as I mentioned earlier. Just as important for the guest to promote it as it is for us to promote it. So they know if there's enough time to do it. I tell them 2 weeks out. I tell them a week out. I tell them the day before. And then I tell them when it goes live. So that gives them plenty of time to set up whatever processes they use in order to blast it out to social media, send it to their email lists, let their friends and family know, and so on and so on and so on. So this gives them plenty of time to prepare for that, because once we go live, it's out. So if they wait until after the fact, you're going to lose momentum by doing that. And that's not a good thing. So we want them to prepare up front. So if I had to rank them in order here, communicating with your guests is probably one of the top ones. It has to be, because if this just goes into a black hole and they don't know when their episode is going live, they don't know when they should be promoting on social media, they haven't even looked at the show notes, I don't even know if the links are correct, that kind of thing. We have to make absolutely sure that we get this right for them, because honestly, we only get one shot at this. Once that podcast goes live, once Libsyn publishes it to the entire world, it's out. So we have to make sure that we get this right before it goes.
And we also do follow-up a month later, right?
Correct, yes. What I do is 30 days out from when the podcast goes live, I send them a reminder email and say, hey, listen, your Screw the Commute podcast went live a month ago. Why don't we send out another email to your listeners and let them revisit the podcast. Also, for people that haven't heard it, this may be the first time they hear that you're on a podcast with Tom Antion. So that gives them an opportunity to grow their own audience, as well as our download numbers go up and we grow our audience. So it's an ongoing effort. It's never a one-shot thing where Tom books the guest sends back an email, the recording is done, and we never hear from them again. That wouldn't work. That doesn't make sense. So communicating with the guests is probably an extremely, extremely important part of this whole thing. And personally, for me, as the guy on the back end, I'm behind the scenes, I've made a lot of friends with these guests. I have ongoing conversations on Facebook with a lot of these people. You would not believe the quality of the people that Tom has booked in the past and probably will be booking in the future. It's just an amazing thing to see what these people are doing in their lives and how they're willing to take the time to talk to other people about what they do. And and in just many cases, I wind up being friends with them on Facebook. We're sending jokes back and forth. We're talking about Tom behind his back, that kind of thing.
All right.
What happens?
So we were going to break for a sponsor message now, but I think you're about at the end of your checklist, right?
I am I am just about at the end of my checklist.
Okay, so
yes.
hold off whatever you have final comments. And
Okay.
instead of me doing a sponsor message, since you actually graduated from the school and became gainfully employed because of it, just tell people about the experience that and the opportunities by learning the internet stuff.
Okay. So I am a graduate, a very happy and proud graduate of the Internet Marketing Training Center of Virginia. I first ran across the school back in 2016, and I signed up back then because I knew that there was something else I wanted to do. I had a full-time job. I guess I'm a recovering IT guy. You're always recovering. I mean, there's never an end to this. And I can consider myself retired from that, but I'm still an IT guy. So it's going to be in my blood. But I knew there was something more that I wanted to do. And I've been following Tom for several years before that. So I knew what he was all about. I knew what he was up to. And when the school opportunity came along, I decided I got to jump into this and see. One of the very first conversations I had with Tom was I mentioned to him that I'm an IT guy. I've got decades of experience and all this other stuff. And I'll never forget the words, Tom, that you said to me. You said, and I quote, "You could probably run rings around me from an IT point of view, but you don't know marketing the way I do, and that's what you need to learn." And I took that to heart, and that's exactly what I did. I ran through all my school assignments, got through all the courses, and I learned so much from there that it was just an incredible eye-opening exercise. And I know that I learned a lot because at one point you wanted to know, who is this guy that's constantly asking questions?
No, this old decrepit guy.
Yeah, this old decrepit guy. Yeah. Well, that was me.
Yeah.
And then after I graduated, it got to the point where you said, I feel sorry for this old decrepit guy. I think I'll just hire him. And so you did. And here I am. And it's been an incredible ride.
Yeah, as a contractor. Since. Yeah. So you're working out of your home in Long Island.
I have my own company.
Pool,
I am
beautiful wife and kids
I have
and stuff.
I have swimming pool. I've got, all sorts of crazy stuff out here on Long Island. Yes. So yeah, the school made a big difference in how I view what I'm going to do for my quote unquote second act. And thanks to you and thanks to IMTC, that's why I'm here right now.
Okay, great. So that's the story, folks, on that. So it's imtcva.org. We just got approved also by the Department of Defense for a military spouse program, and we do give big discounts to all military, but it's particularly military spouses. There's a special program that we're approved for scholarships for them. So if you know anybody that would like to have a portable, one of the things about it's a portable career, and that's the problem. See, I'm in big area military here in Norfolk area and Virginia Beach, and the poor spouses get low paying jobs because people know they're going to leave in 2 years. And so then they have to go try to fight it out to find another low paying job. So with this, the scholarship program specifically said they wanted a portable skill. And there's nothing more portable than being able to go to North or South Korea, which is one of the military spouses that used to work for me, is working right there in South Korea. She used to be in San Diego, used to be in Northern Virginia. So she's never missed a beat because she has this portable career. But anyway, it's a distance learning school, imtcva.org. All right. So what parting thoughts do you have for him there, old decrepit guy?
Okay. All right. Let me do this quickly before my brain rots any further. Okay. So just to give you an overall review of what we've mentioned on this particular episode of the Screw the Commute podcast, there are a lot of moving parts that go into making a successful podcast.
Quality podcast.
A successful quality podcast, yes. Because you can have a successful one, may not be quality. Believe it or not, there's plenty of them out there. In order to do it with quality, there are certain things you have to do. First of all, you have to make sure you understand what the reason is you're doing your podcast. That's one of the important things. The second thing is you got to take care of your guests. You must make sure that you stay in communication with them. The third thing is if you're on a podcast tour, if you're doing other podcasts, make sure you take care of the host of that podcast. And Tom has done that brilliantly with having host pages and having their listeners come to view what we're doing over here. So there's a lot of mutual stuff going on there. You want to promote that. And one of the critical elements of all is quality. And by quality, there's a whole bunch of things that go behind it, but the biggest thing is audio. Make sure you have a setup that sounds good. Most people could put up with lousy audio for a little while, but if it's a consistent, ongoing thing, you're going to lose listeners faster than you could possibly imagine. So quality should be that watchword, that keyword that you use in everything you do, in communication with your guests, in the audio files you generate, in the content you produce, in the show notes, in the transcripts, in the links, and all of that. Always use that word and keep that word in mind, quality, because that's how you become a success.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. So this has been episode 139. And remember, next Monday, I'll be doing by myself what happens in front of the scenes before I pass that file on to Larry. When you put this all together, like I said, we're pushing 150 episodes so far over, I don't know when we started. I can't remember.
We're coming up on a year.
Yeah, coming up on 1 year. Now, some people don't do them this frequently because it's a lot of work. So you may start once a week and then improve it. But I knew I had a crew around me that we could do 3 per week. But you don't have to do that many. But don't do once a month. That's not enough to make any impact. But at least minimum of once a week. So that's the story, and I'm sticking to it. We'll have some great guests this week. Again, the sister to this will be episode 142 next Monday. Make sure you download your freebie automation book and your podcasting white paper at screwthecommute.com/automate free, and get that app at screwthecommute.com/app. And while you're over there, look around the entire site and you'll see exactly what we've been talking about. All right, Larry, thanks a lot, man. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, catch everybody next time.